Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that was a little bit weird. I was having issues with my mic. So, we're going to play some Werewolf, the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest. It should be pretty fun. So I'm going to try to transition over to that. I'm still working on getting this stuff set up. Okay. Yeah, here we go. And I'm going to turn those down and turn them up so that y'all can hear them too. All right. So, yeah, we should be good to start. Sorry about the lighting. It's one of my softboxes went out, so that's a little annoying. But I've got new ones coming in, so should be good. We're going to start a new game. I have not pre-played this. I've played about, I don't know, 5 minutes. I wanted to make sure that it was gonna, like, good. So, this is a game about rage and how it helps us do things that need to be done, as well as things that we later regret, sometimes both. How do you feel about that? I'm okay with anger when it's useful. My rage is balanced. So you're the critical and analytical type? That's okay. There's no right path here. Just your decisions and their consequences. I get it. My decisions need to be fair and just, or let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. The forest. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them, to play hide and seek. I hunt. They dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of winds that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. I let out a howl, eager to run with them. I want everyone to know I'm there. When they bunch up and fly towards me like an arrow, rushing down, they're soon upon me. But just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear, and the dark of night returns. In the darkness, I feel the tangled roots of stories keeping the forest alive, and I hear the spirits asking me to judge the enemy. I open my eyes, and then I wake up. Cold and alone, confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. The spell fascinates me. The smell, both fascinating and repulsive, is everywhere. A memory stirs deep in my mind, something elusive from my earliest childhood. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark-leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen, where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark sponge-like mushrooms cling to the fallen trees. Something is rotten. I can't shake the feeling that something died nearby. I look down and see my hands covered in a dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face, in my hair. Blood. This can't be real. It all feels like a dream, but the twigs and stones hurting my feet seem so real. I pinch myself, but I don't wake up. I just see more clearly. Whose blood is this? Did I kill someone? There's a severed head right in front of me. I'm gonna be sick. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open. The tongue stuck out. It's obscene. I feel bile rising in my throat, and I start to retch. And then, eyes open in the darkness. The enemy. I can see their silhouettes, shades of jet black against the darkness. They reek of metal and acid and oil and money. Massive creatures, some with mandibles, some with spidery legs. Their faceted eyes burn like small industrial furnaces. I look at them, and then something wakes inside my chest. Delight. They see me as prey, and I'm delighted by their stupidity. I get up and start to run. I make sure to catch my foot on a gnarled root and stumble. They follow. I lead them towards my friends waiting in the trees, ready for the ambush. I bite my lip to hold back laughter. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me. And then I wake up. Chapter 1, The Arrival. Maria? Maria, wake up! I jerked upright. My neck was stiff, and the movement sent a sharp, sudden wave of pain through my body. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder. What happened? Overcoming the urge to push her away was hard. She looked at me concerned. You were laughing, like maniacally. I blinked. The memory of the dream was still there, and the taste of blood in my mouth. I was glad I wasn't alone. Thank you for coming with me, I said. The girl next to me smiled. I think we're almost there. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow, I'd managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. We were there to study medicine. We'd both come from Poland for the same reason, to study medicine. It was less expensive here, and we'd both received government scholarships. So, did you want to become a doctor, or? She asked when we first met. I was still searching. I was still looking for something to inspire me. Spending the rest of my life earning bonuses from Big Pharma didn't seem exciting enough. I'd hoped that changing my environment completely, even for a week or two, might clear my head. That's why Anya and I were on a bus to the Werewolf, a small village in the northeast. Sorry guys, if we get more of this, I'm just going to start making up names. A small village in the northeast, Poland, near the border with Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and, according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. Anya seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my cabanossi, dried meaty sausages that were much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around, and I really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks. I had managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visiting Białowieża National Park with me instead. So far it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again? Good question. Why were we there? The most honest answer would have been because I've been dreaming about the forest in Bia ever since I can remember. But people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked in her eyes. I kept it simple so it wouldn't freak her out. I'm looking for my roots. I kept it simple so it wouldn't freak her out. What I didn't tell her was even more important. I knew my family was from there. None of my relatives spoke about it, though. There were a lot of things that weren't spoken about in my life. Strange dreams that plagued me. Half-forgotten tales about forests and wolves that I'd heard before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad and his family. I waited for her to respond. Anya fell silent for a moment. I think it's great that you come from such a magical place. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything about my future, that damn forest and my weird-ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months, and with a clear goal in mind. I had to learn the truth about my roots. My grandfather's stories, secrets, my mother running away. There was a mystery in my past, and it was time I discovered the truth about who I was. But honestly, I had no idea what to expect. Bia looked like an overexposed photo of a village, with the contrast turned all the way up. Heat was pouring from the cloudless sky, scorching the earth, the trees, the grass, the wooden houses, the fences. Everything looked slightly past its best, weary, worn out. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as though they were freshly printed out of the darkest inks. And they moved. For a second I could have sworn they moved. But then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I watched it with suspicion. Hey, do you think there are rabid cats? 'Cause that one is definitely acting weird. I mean, there are rabid squirrels. Why not cats? She shrugged. Looking around, didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go, Anya. Put on her backpack. I'm tired, and I really need to find a toilet. For a moment, I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. Disappointed, I left. I grabbed my backpack and started walking. I hate when people break their promises, I muttered under my breath. Anya caught up with me. Don't worry, you'll find him later. Bia had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was bed and breakfasts. That's where we stayed. I found one that was nice, clean, and that had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff and freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. I shrugged. I'll find him sooner or later. Bia was a quaint tourist town. But I had other things on my mind. I had a clear goal in mind. My family was entangled with this town and the forest. I had to uncover my roots. Anya went with me. Let's explore the town. As we walked through town, Anya nudged me and pointed at a tall, broad-shouldered, freckled guy standing at the bus stop with a lost expression on his face. I remembered his face from the pictures on social media. It was the friend who'd stood me up earlier. I was glad to see him. Bartek. Bartek? I waved to him and smiled. Sorry I missed you earlier. Maya, what are you doing here? He blurted with surprise when he saw me. I was sure you were coming on the later bus. We started walking and talking. His accent was broad and Eastern European. Anya liked him. Anya took an immediate liking to him. I could tell. I could always smell romance in the air. We walked along the only street in the village, nearing the center, if you could call it that. Every house had a garden, and the air was dense with the fragrance of flowers. I took a deep breath. So, did you manage to trace the name I gave you? I asked. Bartek shook his head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. He was clearly lying to me. But why? Come on, man, I said. You wrote to me that you'd found something. But he just clammed up. You know what? I think you should drop it. I stopped. He was scared of something. I turned to Bartek and touched his arm. What's eating at you, man? He shrugged and shook his head. You can tell us, Anya added gently. I gave him time. I swallowed the urge to shake it out of him and just waited. It took a while before he finally opened up. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend from the States was looking for her roots and wanted to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop, and then I mentioned your name. I urged him to continue. Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please. The tension is killing me. One of the old men here told me to go to hell. The other spat on the ground, and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller. And then my own grandmother told me to stop asking questions. She said something else as well. I tensed up. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. And suddenly, the sweet, golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. Who was I? I looked at Bartek, and I saw the stories he'd heard and clearly strained something between us. He was afraid of me. Who was I? We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that could only mean one thing. I was on the right track. My pulse quickened, and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. I was ready to see some sights. Time to see the sights, I nodded at Bartek. Show me everything this place has to offer. We walked through the village, bathed in the sharp rays of the summer sun. It was a lazy afternoon, disturbed only by the occasional passing car, throwing up clouds of dust that hung in the air long after the vehicle was gone. Anya was close to Bartek, asking him about every little detail in the village. People were relaxing or working in their yards. Dogs were barking. Every cat we passed froze to look at us. People went about their day, though many giving us wary stares from time to time. The cats behaved strangely. What's with the cats? I asked as we passed a tabby who stopped in the middle of the sidewalk to meow at us. I don't know. They're cats? Maybe they want to make up for the villagers' manners. Bartek shrugged. Some people are wary of newcomers. Xenophobic jerks. What's wrong with them? I threw my arms in the air. They see an unfamiliar face and immediately assume I'm here to destroy their lifestyle. I think it's more nuanced than that. Bartek scratched his neck, embarrassed by the topic. There's a small conflict around the forest, and it's attracting some weird people. Activists, reporters, bored rich kids. He said as though his dad didn't own multiple businesses. People like that, and they're getting on the locals' nerves. I noticed Anya frowning. Anya looked skeptical. I looked up the conflict online, and it didn't seem so small. It looked pretty important, actually. For a moment, Bartek looked like he was at a loss for words. Well, you're not one of those crazies, and you're like almost local. He smiled. So, what would you like to see in the village of your ancestors? He spread his arms, as if to show me all of the splendor the village had to offer. What do you suggest? New friends, hidden tensions, lost hopes, strange dreams, family graves. Well, I want to look into my past, so Old Cemetery is probably a good place to start doing that. So, we have quite a few churches here, Bartek explained as we walked down the road. 2 Orthodox, 1 Catholic, and even 1 Baptist church, he said, as though it were something uncommon. So I asked about it. And what's so special about that? I wasn't sure what he meant. He looked at me, a bit disoriented, and then it hit him. Oh, of course, you're not from here. Well, Poland is almost exclusively Catholic, so it's a bit uncommon to have all these denominations in one small village. Any Lutheran churches? Asked Anya. I don't think so. Bartek shook his head as he led us to a small wooden church surrounded by a cemetery. Anyway, even though we have all these churches, there's only 1 cemetery. The church was Orthodox, but the graves were a mishmash of styles and faiths. Catholic, Orthodox, atheist, everyone resting together. There was something poetic about it. That's a nice sentiment. There's something poetic about everyone meeting in the same place when they die. Bartek smiled. There is, isn't there? He looked at the cemetery, and for a moment, he seemed lost in his thoughts. All of my family lies here. I mean, the ones that are dead. Hey, what do you think? What do you think happens when you die? One moment. Only memory remained. I was raised an atheist, because of my mom, so I don't think anything happens. You just lose consciousness and your body decays. I looked at him. But the things you've done are remembered and live on. Bartek winced. Well, maybe, he mumbled. He looked over at the cemetery fence. Well, anyway, this is it. Spiritual heart of Bia. We can go and see something else if you'd like. So, that's where we stood. I wanted to go in. He was clearly scared to let me enter the cemetery. I went in anyway. Are you kidding me? I didn't come here to just look at something. I came here to look for something, I said, opening the gate. Bartek shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if that's a good idea. He was hiding something. You found it. My family's grave. Maybe? So what are we waiting for, Anya? Smiled at him. He mumbled something and led us through the labyrinth of graves to the far end of the cemetery. The walkways were narrow, and I could tell Bartek was having a hard time finding the way. It wasn't that he was stalling, he just generally wasn't sure where to go, especially when we got to the older part of the cemetery. At some point, We saw a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, and long-legged, with gray dreadlocks pinned to the crown of her head. She must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. She was marching through the walkways with the fury in her eyes. Bartek quickly stepped between the graves to get out of her way. I didn't move. I didn't see any reason to move out of someone's way, so I didn't. Are you lost? The woman asked in Polish, looking at me with surprising concern. I asked her for directions. Actually, I'm looking for an old grave. My family lived here and... What's the name? Borodix, I answered in a perfect Polish accent. Young Borodixawa. She used an antiquated feminine form of the name. She shook her head. I'm just coming back from there. Go to the end of here, turn left, and then go to the far corner of the wall. She looked at me in a funny way. Why was she there? Why were you there? Is that your family? Did I have a 50-year-old aunt or cousin in Bia? My grandmother knew your family, it would seem, she answered. She always made a point of checking on their graves, so I'm upholding the tradition. Where did you get so big on tradition? Bartek snapped. It was only then that she noticed him. Oh, it's you, she said, with barely hidden disdain. Well, I'd better be going. See you around, I guess? With that, she left, followed by Bartek's hostile gaze. I asked Bartek about her. Who was that? I asked. Watching the woman leave, Bartek winced. Oh, that's Olga. She's a local activist. She left Bia when she was 18 or something and returned a few years back with the notion that she was going to change this place. We continued to the far corner of the cemetery. There, seemingly forgotten and covered in moss, was a lonely grave. It was damaged. The tombstone was broken deliberately. Someone had obviously smashed it with a hammer. The name was half erased. The plaque was also damaged. Someone had tried to scratch out the name, but the letters were still visible. There was a circle around the grave. There's a circle of coarse salt around the grave. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to see that. I needed to know who did this. Who did this? I asked, gritting my teeth. I don't know. Anya squatted, looked at the plaque. Can't read this. The letters are all wrong. She glanced at Bartek. Is it Russian? Belarusian. The same letters, different language, he explained. There were a lot of them here before the war. I looked at Bartek, hoping for some context. Bartek put his hands in his pockets. So, you don't know anything about your dad's side of the family. Whatever happened at least 70 years ago, and someone still remembers. That was absurd. Remember? Remember what? These people have been dead for almost 100 years. What fucking harm could they have done 6 feet in underground? Hey, he yelled, regaining his balance. Are you insane? I haven't done anything, for fuck's sake. He straightened his t-shirt. Let's go. I shouldn't have brought you here in the first place. Girl, you need therapy. Anya shot me a disapproving glance and ran after Bartek. I looked at the grave. For the last time, my family's name looked strange written in unfamiliar Belarusian letters. As we were leaving, I was thinking. There was something unnatural about my family, and me coming to Bielorussia had stirred some old demons. I just had to find out what my ancestors were doing there, who they were. With that thought, I left the cemetery. The day was hot and beautiful, yet I couldn't stop thinking about the devastated grave. Let's go check out the abandoned railway. Bartek wanted to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, It's not like it's that beautiful, but you know, it has an atmosphere, a climate, ambiance, Anya said at the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambiance! Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambiance. We ended up on some abandoned tracks. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. A perfect place to meet a serial killer, I grumbled, looking at the overgrown tracks disappearing among the trees. But with the slow, winding river, a stone's throw away, and with the long, drooping branches of old trees shading the unused railway, that place was really picturesque. The bees buzzed around us, and then the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. I was bursting with energy. Let's race to the trees, I shouted. Before they could react, I was already running. It was an easy win. I just started to jog and gradually sped up, but they never caught up with me. It was only when the shadow of the trees engulfed me that I stopped and looked back. Bartek and Anna were way behind, walking at a leisurely pace, talking, laughing. Jerks. I felt someone watching me. I heard a noise and turned around. A woman was standing among the trees. She didn't look surprised to see me. She was stunning. The woman looked like she was in her late 30s, and the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. She had a perfect hourglass figure, long braids, and the most stunning cheekbones. Her eyes, slightly slanted, were a familiar shade of blue, deep, almost purple. They seemed familiar, and she was looking straight at me. It was a challenge. I saw the challenge in her eyes, and I felt the hair on my neck stand on end. She smiled. I'm Lisa, she said, looking at Anya, and then again at me. You must be Bartek's pen pal, I assume. The one who's searching for her ancestry? How did she know? How did you know that? I asked, suddenly wary. Oh, I know everything, she answered, and smiled even more broadly. Oh, come on now, don't look so scared. Bartek's grandma is my friend, and she's, well, talkative. Since we're alone, I have some advice for you. She looked at the way I'd come. Don't get too attached to your friends there. It won't last. I didn't know what to say, so we just stood there, looking at one another. Do you mind if I join you? She asked when Bartek and Anya approached. I noticed Bartek getting tense. So what's the story with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here, but she helps with the protests. You know, Lisa turned to me. The protests against the logging that his father so eagerly promotes. Bartek winced and snapped. I guess. Sorry, shouldn't we coexist with the forest? And that means taking what we need to survive, just as everything does. 6,000 trucks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. He threw me a glance, looking for help. Logging? In a national park? How can they log trees in a national park, I asked. They don't. It's just near the park's border. And if it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem, Anya chimed in. But it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me. We walked the narrow path. The path was too narrow for all of us to walk together, so at some point, I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So, you're looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? It was none of her business. Why not? I answered less politely than I intended. She looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Sit down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke and I'll tell you a story. She noticed when I hesitated. You need to hear it. I took the blunt. Drugs are bad, okay? So, this is a fictional story, and I took the fictional blunt. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. From what I learned about from Bartek's grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. Her voice was so soothing. I closed my eyes and just went with the story. This is a tainted land, girl. So much blood was spilled that Puska almost lost her mind. Puzuska? Puzuska was one of the words for forest. Polish had lots of those, but she used it in a weird way. Why do you call the forest Puzuska? Isn't Las the right word? I call her Puzuska because it's her proper name. She huffed. Las is to Puzuska what dog is to a wolf. Domesticated, enslaved, used. Puzuska is the primeval forest, one untouched by humans. Primal, strong and feared. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that the words sounded like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Pushusha. As I was telling you, Pushusha almost went mad, and it's not wise to wake those spirits, especially not now. But I need answers. What do you mean? I need answers. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard, with anger smoldering somewhere deep within, ready to jump at my throat. And then, suddenly, something changed. Lisa sighed heavily. You have no idea, do you? About what? What do you mean? I asked. So you have no idea who you are. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus, as though she was looking at something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans and then the Russians. You know, they actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. I nodded politely. I didn't really care, but I did nod politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't really matter, really. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together, so to speak, and the Germans came, and then the Russians again, and then there were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention. I nodded so she would continue. The forest part got my attention. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation. And then they ended up as desperate bandits, she sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured, and burned villages. It didn't matter what language they spoke. Thanks for the history lesson, but where do I fit into all of this? My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes, and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this, she looked at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? And then the weed hit me. And of course, it was the moment when the weed finally hit. That stuff was powerful. And for a moment, I wondered if she hadn't spiked it. I tried to stay focused. I focused and I understood the strange feeling came from within. It's like a long-forgotten dream, like an ancient memory suddenly brought to life. I let it in. We're sitting here around the fire, deep in the Pushushka. We are hungry and desperate, our boots worn down, coats in rags. The forest whispers to me, tells me what has to be done. They have food, and we need it, I say. To keep fighting, We need to live. I explained the plan. My brothers sit in silence as I explain the plan to them. Tomorrow we're going to burn a village. Wolves circle us in the shadows, their eyes bright like fires. Then the visions end. When I came to my senses, Lisa was looking at me. I ran it over in my head. If I understood what you're saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past casts a shadow on my future. I've told you everything I know. If you want to talk more, talk to my girlfriend. We'll be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. I will, I said. Now I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are, Bartek waved to me. I thought I'd lost you. I said my goodbyes to Lisa, and we went back. The bison statues were watching me with their creepy painted eyes, as though they knew me. We returned to the village center. This is such a nice village, exclaimed Anya as we walked across the quiet streets. Nothing moved. The heat was stifling. I was bored. This place gave me flashbacks of my teenage years in the Midwest. I complained, kicked an empty beer can down the road. I was bored and ready to start a fight. I was thirsty. Let's get something to drink, I proposed. I'm parched. The local store was a large mini-mart with all kinds of goods, from beer and vegetables to notebooks and pens. There was a bench near the entrance, and on it were a few local drunks. They looked like they wanted to start a fight, but when I stared them down, they just averted their eyes and pretended there was nothing to see other than their cheap alcohol. I growled at them. I didn't know what came over me, but I fixed my eyes and the meanest look I could, bared my teeth and growled. Whoa, girl, the man jumped back and lifted his hands in a conciliatory gesture. We meant no harm. The rest laughed uncomfortably. We spent some time inside browsing the Latvian, Lithuanian, and Belarusian goods. Why was there nothing Polish here? And who in their right mind drinks coriander soda? I was putting a soda back on the shelf when we heard a loud commotion from outside. Loud voices. Some slurs, some curses. And a clear, mocking polite, I'm so sorry, darlings. I don't understand. Do you like my skirt? Ah, fuck. Bartek murmured under his breath. I want it in. Hey, Bartek, I said, pushing the items I'd picked into his hands. Pay for me, will you? I'll give you money back in a minute. Before the poor guy had time to answer, I was outside. There's the trick. You need to do these things before people can react. Then you can always say, but you didn't stop me. I assessed the situation. It was clear what was happening the moment I stepped outside. There was the bench, and on the bench were the drunkards hurling obscenities. And next to them was the awfully polite target of those obscenities. They were definitely not local. The person was old. Not helpless granny old, but old with deep wrinkles and narrow mouth. And they had the unisex grace of a tired, heroin-preserved rock man. Their shoulder-length, disheveled hair completed the look. I totally dug their style. They had a peculiar style, fashion that you rarely see, even in the U.S. It looked great on them. They had a clean shave and eyes highlighted with eyeliner. Their nails were painted bright blue. They wore heavy army boots, an outrageously red skirt, a tank top, and lots of leather jewelry. On their bag were lots of pins, all kind of LGBTQA plus flags, anarchist and pacifist symbols. I think some German band stripes. I approached the drunkards. I zeroed in on the drunkards. What do you think you're doing? I asked in Polish. This was a sentence I heard a lot as a child. To zy wybrasz. They looked at me, surprised. The men were unnaturally tense, veins on their necks standing out, pulsing, the whites of their eyes bloodshot. And who the hell are you? Asked the one who seemed to be the leader of the group. I punched him. I'm the girl who broke your nose, I answered with a grin. What? And I punched him. And then I broke his nose. Maya, shouted Anya, shocked. I didn't listen to her. This wasn't my first rodeo. I got into fights all the time. I loved fighting. It's the only way that I could really get my heart pumping, my body working, the adrenaline in my veins, and an enemy under my fists. It was a glorious feeling. The stranger in the red skirt also wasn't new to such situations. I could only admire the way that they used their heavy army boots. We kicked their asses. We punched, we ducked, we kicked. Some bloodied knuckles were a small price to pay for victory. But before anything serious could happen, there was a pierced, irritated shout. It stopped us all in our tracks. Hey! Someone said suddenly from behind our backs. The voice was loud and piercing, and there was something about it that made the men stop immediately. Made me pause as well, but the stranger in the red skirt seemed to stop out of politeness, not because of the sheer power of the voice. I turned around. It was Lisa. What the fuck is going on here? Kim, are you insane? And you, she pointed a finger at the men, you should stop drinking that moonshine. It makes you pick fights you can't win. She looked ferocious. And the drunks started explaining themselves. But look at this. Elzuina, she said one of them, gesturing towards us. For the last fucking time, my name's Lisa. She was furious. And this is my friend. You're going to leave them alone. Got it? The drunkards mumbled and then went back to drinking. Thanks, Lisa, Kim said in English. You shouldn't have. Oh, but I wanted to. How did she command so much respect? Why did they listen to you, I asked. She turned to me and shrugged with just a hint of a smile. Oh, they have their reasons. I think I saw relief in her eyes when she looked at me. Hi, Maya. I was worried you'd gotten yourself into trouble there. So, will you join us on the anti-logging protest tomorrow? She asked, after a while. Suddenly, a feeling rushed over me. I was cold. I suddenly felt cold despite the hot, sticky summer air, as though a wind from the forest that blew only for me, inside me, chilling my bones and blood. There was something sad and helpless about it, even though it felt all-powerful. A word appeared in my mind, a strange one, that was neither Polish nor English. Harano. I felt like I was being watched, and I looked up and saw Kim observing me with a curious expression. We haven't been properly introduced, they said in a soft voice. They were hiding something. I looked at them and realized they were much more than they first seemed. Under their colorful attire lurked something else, something primal. Why are you looking at me like that? I asked. I know you have strange dreams, they whispered. I suspect that the forest is reaching out to you. They leaned in closer to me. It runs in your blood. The words were like a punch to the gut. Trust me, I know. I didn't want to hear it. Bullshit, I whispered back through clenched teeth. You're a warrior, they said, looking at me in the eyes. You'll make it through in one piece. Suddenly, I felt confident. I felt a surge of confidence. I wasn't making that up. There was something strange in my family history, and there were people who knew what was going on. Before I could ask more, Anya and Bartek approached, and Kim shook their head, silencing me. Meet us tomorrow at the logging site. They blew me a kiss, put their arm around Lisa, and walked away. We decided to leave as well. kept looking over my shoulder, but no one was following us. We called it a day and went back. The B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back, smiling and a little flustered. "What a day," she smiled. "So, what do you think?" I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. They were cutting down the forest. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I wanted to check out this protest people were talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow? I remembered the scene in the shop. Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. I didn't think people in Poland usually picked fights so easily. Maybe they just envied Kim's style. Anya tried to joke, but she seemed worried. I told her what happened when I talked to Lisa. Something weird happened when I was talking to Lisa. I was thinking it was her joint, but I saw some things. It looked like something from the past. Like, from your past? For a second I reached for words to explain to her, but I couldn't really. I think it was my grandpa. It's hard to say, but sure was weird. I mentioned the graveyard. What happened here that people are still vandalizing my family's grave? What did my grandfather do? She put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it was, it's not your fault. It wasn't, but it could be my responsibility. I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. I was tired, sure, but also excited. And excitement isn't the best for sleep. I lay there for a while, thinking about everything that had happened and what might happen next. The wind from the open window tapped over my skin as I watched a silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision I had that day. My roots were here. I could feel them, almost touch them. And they were reaching for me. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. I felt the answers that I was looking for were within my reach. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people, and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry, and they slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors. I drifted off. In a big city, old men sit in leather chairs, lazily enjoying their ever-growing wealth. They watch Bielorussia on flickering screens. They watch me. I feel excitement rising deep within my stomach, throughout my whole body. I am a weapon. I am a razor-sharp knife. I am a sword. I am a gun waiting to be fired. I am asleep for now, but soon someone will use me, and I can't wait. I feel a pull, and I surrender to it. I am pointed towards the clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly, there are just trees and tree trunks. I howl. I look at the moon and I howl. The trees are dead, and I'm the only one left to sing their story. There's a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirring chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait unmoving. I turn to the forest for answers. The dead don't hold answers, and neither do the machines. I walk between the trees, trying to hear their wisdom. They whisper to me, telling me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other, an old, sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful, rotting stench. I know that much. But how can we do it when we just don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me in the clearing. I jump towards them. I want to be with them in the sky. I try to jump, but suddenly my legs feel weak. They descend to the opposite side of the clearing. One by one, other shadows join them. I stand in the middle of it all. All right. So we are now on chapter 2. This seems like a good stopping point. So I think I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to do a less... looks like this will be a 5-part Let's Play. I'm open to any feedback. Just let me know. And I may do the second segment of this tonight. I may not. Got to make that decision later. But if I do, I will see y'all then.